All right, I'm a County Court judge, and last year I sentenced 90 people as a result of pleas or being found guilty, and I gave them a total of 270 years, which adds up to 3 years each on average. Let's imagine that we've got a very serious assault, which is 9 times out of 10 what the County Koori Court is dealing with. As a sentencing judge, you want to know basically 4 things, and I'll always talk about the male. Here we obviously have females before the Koori Court, but I'm going to be doubling up with everything. The 4 basic questions that it comes down to when you're assessing a sentence are: who is he? What's he done? Has he done it before? And what do you want me to do about it? That's really what your function is. Now, that sounds very simple, but what I want to do, just for a minute, is just outline to you a number of the things that a sentencing judge has to take into account. Not necessarily in order. You need to know the effect on the victim. What was the effect on the victim? Has the victim forgiven the accused? Does that affect rehabilitation? Does the victim want vengeance? Does the victim still suffer injuries? Has the victim been scarred? Does the victim have psychological impact that's going to go on forever? Has the victim's family suffered from all this? What is the attitude of the victim now? You then look at the foreseeability of the effect on the victim of the assault. What sort of assault is it? Where does it fit within the range of assaults? How has it affected this victim in the sense that the accused person could foresee? What was the foreseeability of what they did? What were the circumstances, the milieu in which it occurred? How violent was it? How forceful was the violence? Did it happen in front of the kids? All those sorts of questions. You then have to look at whether there's been compensation order, whether there's going to be a restitution order, whether there's any likelihood of any compensation in monetary terms being made. You then look at aggravating features. There's a breach of trust. Is it a babysitter? Is it someone who had responsibility? Is the assault on a small child? All those sort of things. Is assault on a woman? Was the victim absolutely defenceless? All those matters have to be looked at. You then look at the age of the accused, the occupation of the accused, the status of the accused, the health of the accused, physical, mental, emotional, not only at the time of the offending but at the time of the sentencing. You have to look at the family circumstances of the accused. You have to look at their relevant personal background. You have to look at their prior convictions, the nature of them, how many of them, over what period of time, for what reason. You have to look at their moral culpability. How responsible are they for their actions? You have to look at the principles in verdens. Does the person have a psychological disorder? Are they schizophrenic? Do they have a psychiatric condition? Do they have a personality disorder? What effect did any of that have on them? When you lock them up, which you almost always do, what effect will that psychological condition have on them in jail? Will it worsen in jail? Will they cope with jail? Will they continually fight in jail? Do they have an explosive personality that's going to get them flogged? Well, they have to do it in protection. All those things have to be looked at. You have to look at remorse or lack of it. When that remorse came about, are they truly sorry? Are they just sorry for the position in which they find themselves? All those aspects. Have they ever done jail sentences before? How long have they been in custody for this? Are they affected by drugs? Are they still affected by drugs? What effect does that have? Were they affected by alcohol? What's the background of that? Or the significance of it. You have to look at their background. Were they subject to sexual abuse, violent abuse, drunken abuse? Were their siblings subjected to it? Did they watch their mother subjected to it? Did they watch their father subjected to it? What have they watched in terms of violence? What have they seen as they grow up? You then have to look at what an appropriate punishment is. You have to look at general deterrence. How prevalent is this within the community? What sentence do I have to pass to try and deter others, like-minded people, from doing the same thing? Specific deterrence. What do I have to do to this particular person to stop them doing it again? The sentence must reflect denunciation, the community attitude towards it. The sentence must reflect the prospects of rehabilitation. Are there any prospects of rehabilitation? Are they good? Are they improbable? Are they fragile? If there's a co-accused, you have to look at parity. What did he get? If the person's pleaded guilty, which in the Koori Court they have to, what is the benefit of the guilty plea? Does it display remorse? What's the utilitarian benefit of it? What does it save the community in terms of cost of a trial? What does it save the community in terms of witnesses being called and cross-examined and distressed and all the like? You have to look at what, and I love this word, parsimony. What's the actual offence really worth? I think it's a Methodist word that snuck in somewhere, but what's this offence actually worth? You're aware that prison is the sentence of last resort. Has the person assisted the Crown? Now, all those matters have to be taken into account. And as Frank Zappa would have described it, questions, flooding into the mind of the concerned Herald Sun reader. Now, I can tell you that when I sentence somebody and the Herald Sun bags it, on the Tuesday that not many people reading it have thought of all that. Now, they are the questions that a sentencing judge has to deal with, and that's just some of them. Those questions and the way in which they're answered has, in Australia, always been done on a European base, an English base. We inherited the English common law. Those questions, and most of them, involve European perceptions of human conduct. Now, most people who come to this country who aren't used to that are immigrants. They come here because they choose to. In the 1980s and the 1970s, as criminal lawyers, one of the first problems we faced was the influx of Vietnamese refugees. Now, all those questions have to be asked, not just for white fellas, but for Vietnamese and for black fellas. With the Vietnamese, the problem was that they simply assumed that what they were doing was just waiting for you to tell them how much it was going to cost them to pay the magistrate. Their whole structure was, do not tell these people anything. If you were appearing for legal aid, you worked for the government. You were not to be trusted. So a decade was spent trying to get Vietnamese people to give you any of that sort of information. Same thing you get now with the Sudanese, brought up in camps. They've watched people killed so their family can survive. They're not going to tell you this stuff. They're not going to open themselves up. They're not going to disclose this. They don't want to. They're too fragile. They're too threatened by it all. Now, that's that overall situation, and they're immigrants. They're people who've chosen to come here for a better life. They weren't people who've always been here who had that better life taken from them by force. So what you've then got to look at is what occurs when a Koori, being in Victoria, I'll use the expression Koori, or blackfella, when a Koori comes before a court. Their grandparents, this is these days, their grandparents were on the station register with the stock, with the cattle. Their parents, in all probability, if they're over 45, at one stage weren't even human beings. People forget, it was only in the 60s that recognition of Aboriginal people as human beings came into existence. They have 200 years of distrust of us, and it's justifiable. You then take into account the inherent personality of Aboriginal people. They are usually quiet and very respectful. When they sit in a dock, they switch off. Effectively, what I, as Gubbs, you probably know the expression, as a Gubb judge am doing has got nothing to do with them. This is just what happens to them. Aboriginal people frequently accept that jail is what happens to them. They sit in the dock and they stare at the floor. And I, as a sentencing judge, get virtually none of the information needed to answer that multitude of questions. Because that Koori accused is not going to tell their Gubb barrister matters that are very personal to them. They think, what's the point anyway? They might give them a bit of detail. They might say the other bloke was asking for it. So that's about the level of it. So you're continually dealing with people who sit there, who in the county court, because we deal with the indictable matters, the serious matters, very serious matters, usually have prior convictions. They just sit there and they cop it. And you're sentencing them almost in a vacuum. And you have a lot of what I call North Balwyn, aren't we good to the blackfellas bullshit, of, you know, all these speeches that are made about Koori justice and restorative justice and all these things. They're all terrific concepts. They're wonderful. But they don't help me as a sentencing judge with a blackfella in the dock staring at the floor. Now, what has to be done is a method of getting that information. Now, I'm not talking about other states, I'm simply talking about Victoria. What happened about a decade or so ago was that Kate Audie, and some of you may know Kate, and other people thought, we will try and start a court which can get this information. And so the Magistrates Court created the Koori Court after massive consultation with community. And about 4 years ago, the Chief Judge, Michael Rosines of the County Court and others decided that why couldn't that be done in the more serious jurisdictions? And I've just told you what the average sentence is. Now, no other state has tried this on, and I've been speaking to people in New South Wales and Queensland, and they didn't think you'd be able to do it. So the purpose of the Koori Court, from the administration of justice point of view, which is what I'm talking about at the moment, is to obtain information. Now, the aim of it, of obtaining that information, when it's looked at a more global sense, is to try and reduce recidivism, which is a very difficult word to define, the breaches of orders, to try and get people to attend community service, to attend things that can assist them within the community, to reduce the rate of offending, and to reduce the seriousness of the offending. Now, we are dealing with people who, not all of them obviously, but at the level when they get to the county court of really serious violence, they are almost always from an alcoholic background, alcohol or drug dependent themselves, and that's what we've got to deal with. Their chances of recidivism are massive. That's what we have to deal with and have dealt with. Now, what happens is this. The person is arraigned in the County Koori Court and they've got to plead guilty to get there, all right? And we don't deal with sex offences. They're arraigned and they plead guilty. There are then initial submissions made by the prosecution and by the defence, if necessary, as to about what happened. That person is then asked, do you want to come and sit at this table? It's done informally. The courtroom's been smoked, which to us is, a lot of people think that's a bit of a joke. It certainly is not. It's very, very important to Koori people that it's been smoked. It's an opportunity for a fresh start. In New Zealand, they sing, so that all the evil spirit. When I watch a New Zealand Maori court, they're sensational. They all sing and dance, and the punter's sitting there waiting for his 5 years. It's terrific stuff. But anyway, different concept. So what happens is they're asked if they want to come down. They then come down if they agree, and they sit at the table. At that table sits the judge with at least one elder on either side. We're starting to look at sitting with 3, which we think might work even better, and an elder on either side of the judge. The prosecutor's there and the defence barrister's there. The accused obviously is there with a support person if there is one. Often it's mum. That causes problems with security because they try and hug them, and the prison officers have fits and, you know, all that sort of thing. And you're someone from the Office of Corrections usually. And what then occurs is, and I find it difficult to explain this, the elders have no part in the actual sentence itself. They are obtaining the information that the judge needs, but they are going much further than that. They then engage that accused person in what could be fairly described as a cultural conversation. Now, it's only in the last few years of doing this that I've even begin to understand what it is that the elders are doing. You or I, if asked, and this is as briefly as I can do this, you or I, if asked to name our extended family, might be able to get to 20 or 30 before you really have to start thinking. A Koori in his natural environment will get to about 300. When they're taken from that environment and put on missions, and they're all put on Lake Tyres where they're all from different mobs and they hate each other and they've been fighting for 50,000 years, and they have to deal with each other, they lose contact with their mob, they cannot name those people, they cannot name who they are. Some of them don't even know whether they've got relatives and the like. That's what Stolen Generation's all about. I'm not going to go into all that, but that is exactly what it's about in terms of criminality. Those people are dislocated. They have no sense of who they are. And because they have no sense of who they are very frequently angry and they flog people, which is why the Koori Court deals so much with serious violence. That emptiness is filled frequently with either alcohol or drugs. Now, what happens is that we do not dispense customary law, despite what the Court of Appeal might try and tell you. We do not in any way, shape or form give out any form of customary punishment. It's the white man's whack. As I say to every Koori, and so to the other judges, every Koori who sits on the other side of that table, my friend, you are going to get the white fella's whack. These elders have no part in the sentence. It's mine, I do it. Don't ever lose sight of that. But that's the scenario that these elders then start to deal with. And they are quite brilliant. The first thing that they'll often do is make the connection. And for me, as a white person, to sit like 3 or 4 feet from someone who's done 5, 6 years in jail, and is now 25, and watch the eye contact, and I tell them they don't have to talk to me, they just talk to the elders, don't have to talk to me. Watching the eye contact that is just immediate with the elders, just the desire that's in their eyes when they're talking to the elders. And the elders will make contact. Uncle Lloydie Hood down at Morwell, for example, is just brilliant. I don't think we've ever had one yet that Lloydie didn't play footy with his grandfather. And he could tell you about games that happened in 1953 where your great uncle kicked 3 goals 4 from the forward pocket and we carried him off, and you watch them connecting and be giving some sense from a person that they respect of who they are. It's not a yarn about their grandfather. It's a story, and it's a healing story, and it's a story about them, about who they are, as it goes up the structure. And the elders do this, and they do it in different ways, and there's male elders and female elders, and they all have different ways of going about it. But they connect. And it's invariable that, I would say, 4 out of 5 of the accused start crying, and we are dealing with some, I'd say this, nasty people. I'd say 4 out of 5 start crying and express that they are just ashamed of themselves, they're ashamed of what they've done, and they're ashamed of who they are, of what they've become, and they don't want to be like that. And the elders then are able to say to them, well, look, there's this connection, there's that connection, got to find out who you are. You'll feel a lot better if you find out who you are. And there's Link Up, and there's a whole raft of organisations that they can direct them towards. Now, a lot of them are going to jail, and you can do that in jail. But the elders go through that, and they're able to reduce them. And like Auntie Margaret she was brilliant at it with people who had kids. She'd say to them, with this smiling assassin's face, now, you've got 3 little children. And they go, yeah, you know. And she said, and talks about the children. I know them, she'll say, and they're beautiful little kids. I think they're the loveliest kids in Moe, she'll say. Oh, thanks, Auntie Margaret, they go. And then she'll say, well, how do you reckon those little kids feel while you're in jail? What do you reckon the last thing is they think of at night while you're in jail? Do they remember your violence? Do they remember your drinking? What do you think they think? And this sort of conversation takes place not in a lecturing form, but to an absolutely rapt and encaptured audience, being the accused. And that's what happens. And we've discussed with the elders a lot, and that the point of view of the victim is put strongly by the prosecutor and confronted, and you've got, you know, the prosecutor sitting here and the partner sitting about there with the prosecutor saying, this is what the victim says. Tears, shame. Now, that's the Koori part of it. That's them trying to heal and connect their own. And it works. And I wouldn't have believed anyone who told me that 3 or 4 years ago, not in an urban situation. I mean, we don't have any customary law at all in the sense of what we do in the Koori Court. Customary law at Morwell is if you pinch my slab, I'll stab you. I mean, that's what we're trying to deal with. Right? The Tanami Desert has no place. That sort of concept is just not what happens. But that's how they deal with their cultural aspects. That's what they're about. So, what does the sentencing judge get out of that? What I get out of that is the sense of shame, is the prospects of rehabilitation. Is this person fair dinkum or not? And the elders will tell them if they don't think they are, you're gamming me. All right? And they're into it. Tears again. So, is there true remorse? What is the likelihood of this person rehabilitating? Are they fair dinkum about doing courses? Are they fair dinkum about rehabilitating? Are they fair dinkum about not flogging people? Do they understand the consequences to victims when you do that stuff? Are they going to do things about the sexual abuse they suffered as a child? Are they going to do something about grief counselling? Because, I won't go into this, but a number of you probably be well aware, death within the Koori community is a very, very important thing and a very, very frequent thing. Their life expectancy is nothing like ours. So, and funerals and things like that. The only reason we adjourn Koori Court's funerals, if there's a funeral, we just stop, all right? So, grief counselling. Now, these people that we're dealing with on the other side of that table haven't had these things. They've been on drugs and grog for years. It's just in the car on Thursday's pension day and who's flush. Go and get a couple of things of goon and get in a fight. But as a sentencing judge, you can make an assessment of what are the prospects here. You've got that information. And this is really important for a judge, you always find out why it really happened. Right? Not what they told the coppers. Those elders find out why this did happen. And there can be some pretty stunning reasons. Right? I won't go into that because it's more private for the purpose of the accused. So you find out what the motive was. Any aggravating features about it. Like, for example, you'll find Englishman Holmesy's Castle. Right? So when you go into someone's house and flog them, that's grievous. That's aggravated burglary. That's the Director of Public Prosecutions goes over to the Court of Appeal and says, you've got to get 1 million years for this. From a Koori's point of view, if you know he's in there and you're going to belt him, go and do it. I mean, it's half-witted to wait for 3 weeks to meet him on the street. It's a different concept. Totally different concept. But all those sorts of factors come to the judge who can then do that when imposing the sentence. Right? So that information, which would never be available in the normal process, becomes available. Once you got it, you go away, the elders play no part in it. As a judge, you work out the sentence, you go back up, you put the wig and the gown on, and you go, bang, try this for size. So that's what we do. And the situation is this, guess what? It works. We are dealing with people that I would have reckoned at least half would reoffend within a year. These are people with 6, 7, 8 pages of form sometimes. We have now dealt with nearly 70. 3 have reoffended in 4 years. The number of breaches and non-attendances have dropped dramatically on their community-based orders. It works. And I can tell you a lot of them have been locked up. Still a 50% or something going in. And I think the reason that they don't reoffend, in the evaluation that was carried out, is quite simple. Virtually all of them said it was the first time that they could ever remember what had been said in the courtroom. The first time that they'd ever been spoken to like a person in a courtroom. That they were grateful to the elders for representing who they are and portraying who they are in the white man's courtroom. And they feel as if they do reoffend, that they're letting the elders down. Let me down, that's not a drama. They care less about that. But they're letting the elders down. So 1, the judge is giving an informed sentence, and 2, they just don't want to let the elders down. Now, as I said, I would have expected 50 to reoffend. 3 out of 7 is what, about 5, 6%. And that's what happens, and that's what I think why. All right, so that essentially is what the Koori Court's all about, and that's why it exists, and that's what it has achieved so far. Now, people tell me in the fool's paradise that that'll continue. You get told things like, well, the ones who are going to reoffend haven't got out of jail yet, so they haven't had a chance, but I think that's being cruel. Yeah, so essentially, ladies and gentlemen, that's what it's about, and that's what a number of very strong-willed and very serious people are endeavouring to achieve.